All right, so last time I reviewed the smallest dive watches Spinnaker has ever sent me, and today we're going to review the biggest. Today we're taking a look at the 46mm Amalfi Diver. Let's take a look. So I think to a lot of people, Spinnaker is known primarily for their vintage style dive watches. They do a lot of dive watches that draw a lot of inspiration from dive watches from like the 60s and 70s. They've done a lot of homages and a lot of watches that just really kind of have the feel of that era. But they also do some more modern watches, and this is the first one of their modern watches I've really gotten to take a look at. The Amalfi Diver is part of their core series. It's a brand new design. It's not, as far as I know, referencing any other previous watches from any other brands, so it's really cool to see them do something like this. It's a really clean, fresh look at the dive watch. It's very big, very bold colors, and just a really fun watch to look at and to wear. And yet it does, even despite its, fairly large 46mm diameter, it does wear pretty well. It's got really good lume, and it is a full-featured no compromise dive watch. You're getting sapphire crystal, 200 meters of water resistance, screw down crown, pretty decent lume. So they kind of nailed everything there when looking at the spec sheets. Now, there are some drawbacks to it, notably in this one, and this is, I think, the second watch from Spinnaker that I've gotten that has had some quality control issues, so I'll be going through those as well as we get through the review. I do want to mention, as usual, this watch was sent to me by Spinnaker for review. It is a watch that I get to keep after the review is done, so big thanks to them for sending that out, but keep that in mind as you go through the review. This is a watch that I received for free. I will be giving you guys, again, my unbiased opinion of it, talking about the positives as well as the negatives to the watch. But let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is give you guys an idea of how this wears on the wrist, because it is a very large watch and the size is maybe a concern for some people. So I've got a couple of other Spinnaker watches. We have the Cahill at 40mm, the Flus at 43mm, and then this Amalfi Diver at 46mm. Which again is on the large size. It's much larger than I typically wear. So I'm going to go ahead and throw all of these on my 7.5-inch wrist. Let you guys decide if you feel like it's something that you can wear or not. For me, I was actually really surprised at how well it fits. I think it actually looks really good on my wrist, and it wears super comfortably. Like it conforms to the wrist very well, and it's one of the best fitting watches that I've really ever worn. I was really impressed with it. So it does look large. It has a lot of wrist presence, but I don't feel like it looks ridiculously large or oversized by any means. It just has a lot of presence, but I think the case shape really helps a lot because again, it's super comfortable on the wrist, much better than I was expecting. So a really big plus there. So starting as usual with the specifications and dimensions on the watch. Inside, this is an automatic watch. You're getting the Seiko NH35 movement with hacking and hand winding, 40-hour power reserve, just great all-around movement, I think, in this price range. So always nice to see that one in there. You're getting a flat sapphire crystal with some anti-reflective coating, 200 meters of water resistance, some really good lume, which we'll be taking a look at a little bit later. As far as size goes, you're going to be getting 46mm diameter, 52mm lug to lug, 15mm height, and 24mm lug openings. So definitely larger lug openings than usual, which is going to limit your strap options there. Taking a closer look at the watch, you are getting a screw down crown, which helps with that 200 meters of water resistance. And I think they did a really good job of using color on this watch. They have a lot of different colorways. You can get this, I believe, also in kind of a teal color, black or orange. So some really nice bright colors. One of the first things that you notice, I think, coming out of this is the bezel. So the bezel is really cool there. As you can see, it's kind of engraved in there, and you've got a reverse engraving on the first 15 minutes on the bezel markings there. So in this case, the background is cut out and the numerals and indices are raised, whereas on the rest of it, it's the numerals are cut out themselves, so there's a little indents there. This is an aluminum bezel insert, and you get a nice bright color, and it does look really cool. It's definitely one of the standout features of the watch. The bezel is 120 click unidirectional bezel, and it has a very smooth feel to it. It turns pretty easily, but not to the point where it feels loose. So I think I really like the bezel action on it. Unfortunately, there is a fair amount of back play, as you can kind of see when we go there. More so than usual on other Spinnaker watches that I've tested, but it is really easy to grip and turn, so that's a plus there. You're getting a lumed pip at the 12 o'clock marking as well. The dial is very, I think, geometric. You get a kind of inner circle that is sort of indented a little bit, and it's inside that circle that the hour hand primarily resides. You get a nice big, bold arrowhead hour hand, and the indices are also very large and easy to see, so really good legibility on the watch. I like what they've done with the second hand and the minute hand. The hour hand is brushed, but the minute hand and the second hand both have a kind of a red paint applied to them, which gives a nice pop of color, and yeah, it looks really pleasing even in some of the macro shots as well. You're getting a framed date at 3 o'clock, in this case with a black date wheel, which I think matches pretty well. Because the watch is so large, they were able to also include an indus, a loomed applied hour marker at 3 o'clock in addition to the date, so in the dark you can still see the 3 o'clock marker, which sometimes on smaller watches the date completely takes the place of that 3 o'clock indice, and so you lose the lume at 3 o'clock and it looks a little bit odd in the dark, but in this case you don't have that problem. You get a signed crown with some pretty heavy-duty crown guards as well. One of the things I think Spinnaker does really well with their case design is they put a good curvature to their lugs, and so they always tend to wear really well on the wrist. And this one, even though I wouldn't typically wear a 46 millimeter, it just fits my wrist really well. I was really impressed with that, given the size, just how well it hugs the wrist, and yeah, it's really comfortable. So it is definitely a large watch, but again, it wears really well because of the curvature of the lugs there. Another thing that helps it wear so well is the bracelet. You can see that they've designed it so that the first link does not protrude at all past the lugs, so you're not getting any additional length on there, and it folds almost completely flat against the back of the case. So really nice articulation there on the bracelet and all the links. Just a really great, comfortable bracelet. It is a fairly large bracelet. You're getting 24 millimeters at the opening, but it does taper down to 22 millimeters when it hits the clasp. The clasp is very nicely milled clasp with double security lock. So you get one there and then there, and double push button release there. So good, secure clasp. It does have a dive extension, which in this case with a 200-meter diver you might actually use that. So if you were going to go doing some light diving, you could have it on that, pop out that dive extension. It's just a pressed dive extension, so not nearly as nice as the rest of the clasp, but it is there. If you watched the review of the Cahill, you might remember that the dive extension on the Cahill took up almost all of the micro adjusts. You kind of have a slimmer problem here, so you have 5 micro adjust holes here, but only 3 of them are usable. The last 2 are taken up by the dive extension. So I've got this, I won't go into any further. I've got it on the 3rd hole there, but I can't go into the 4th or 5th because the dive extension is in the way. That said, I was still able to get a really good fit with it, even having just 3 micro adjusts. So having 3 micro adjusts, I think, is generally going to give you enough play to get a pretty decent fit on it. One thing that was a little bit disappointing when I took some closer looks on the macro shots is I did notice some dust underneath the glass. So there are a couple of little specks underneath the sapphire crystal that are there, and there's the kind of thing that you probably would not notice at all normally, but if you look close enough you can see them, and again at this price point at $400 I would have expected them to get that completely cleared out. This is the second Spinnaker that I've gotten that has had that issue, so if you do order the watch, definitely check it when you get it, and I'm sure Spinnaker will be happy to take take care of you if you wanted to get that replaced or something. But it's something to kind of keep an eye out for if you do order it. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the Lume on the Amalfi Diver, which is pretty good. It's not as good as the Cahill that I looked at last time, but pretty close. And so we're going to go ahead and do a Lume test and kind of compare it to some other watches. I'm going to go ahead and just throw it against the best I got. So again, I did this test with the Cahill, so we've got the SWC Diver and the Spinnaker Cahill going up against the Amalfi Diver. And you can see that the Amalfi is the dimmest of the three, but again, these other two are very good watches when it comes to Lume, especially the SWC. So if it comes kind of close to that, that kind of, I think, is a pretty strong point in its favor. This time what I want to do is look at the marker brightness. The hand brightness on the Amalfi and the SWC is actually very close. So we're going to look at the marker brightness this time and kind of give you a comparison, and we'll go through and see how it lasts over the course of an hour. And you can see that the Amalfi drops off pretty quick. After the first 10 minutes, it has a pretty big drop. But then after that, it kind of levels out again so that by the end of the hour, it's not too much dimmer than the other two. So it holds on there pretty good. And again, I think the Lume is pretty good for a, for a dive watch. Definitely on the upper end of anything that Spinnaker has put out, one of the best Lume watches that they've done. So good job there with the Lume, I think. Okay, so what are the biggest positives to this watch, in my opinion? I think the first one is just the design. It's a really fun design, very colorful. I love the bold colors that they've chosen. They've got a lot of different options as far as colors go. I think the bezel is really cool, the way that they've designed it with the embossed or engraved cutouts for the different markings, and then especially that 0 to 15 segment of it being sort of in reverse, I think is a cool touch. And just overall, all of the colors and design choices and everything is just really comes together really well. It's a really fun, fresh, colorful dive watch. I think it would be a great summer dive watch, especially given the size. It's sort of funny that it's coming out in the middle of winter. I think their intent was to have it ready by summer, but they were still working out some kinks. So I'm wearing it now in the middle of winter in my freezing cold house here, really dressing warm. But I think this would be much better summer dive watch, for shorts and t-shirts or hanging out at the beach, that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's one pro. The other one I think is the Lume. I think that this has some really good Lume for a watch, particularly from Spinnaker. Again, in the past, a lot of their watches have had sort of a minimal level of Lume to them, but recently they've really been stepping up their game. And I think the Amalfi kind of follows that trend of having really decent Lume on their watches. So definitely impressed with that as well. Talking about the cons for the watch, obviously I think the first one and the biggest one is the quality control issues, particularly when they're coming in at sort of this upper end price point. This is one of their most expensive watches at $400 retail. I would have really expected it to have all of those kinks worked out. Seeing some dust under the dial like that is a little bit disappointing. And then the back play on the bezel was a little bit unexpected as well. I would like to see that tightened up a little bit. The second con that I have is kind of more of a design choice, but I'm not a big fan of having a 24 millimeter lug width because it really limits the strap options that you can put this on. The good news is that the bracelet that it comes on is really well done. So I wouldn't imagine really changing this out to different straps, but if you wanted to throw this on a NATO or a rubber strap or something like that, you're gonna have a little bit harder time finding a 24 millimeter width as opposed to like a 22 millimeter width. But yeah, that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Another issue is with the dive extension taking up 2 of your 5 micro adjust slots. So you only have 3 usable micro adjusts, which it would have been nice to have all 5. But I think it's a little bit more forgivable on this watch than on the Cahill. Whereas on the Cahill, you only had 2 usable micro adjusts. And in this case, you're getting 3. And then you're also, much more likely, I think, to use the dive extension on this watch. It is a full-fledged 200-meter diver with decent Lume and everything. So it's the kind of thing that I could see some people might actually throw over a wetsuit. So having that trade-off of having the dive extension as an option, losing the 2 micro adjusts is, maybe a trade-off that's going to be okay for some people. For a lot of people, they would probably rather have the extra 2 micro adjusts than the dive extension. But yeah, it depends on what your primary use case of this watch is going to be. And then the final issue with it, again, it's not really a con, it's just it is a big size and it's a watch that's not really going to work with everybody and their wrist sizes. But you know, again, last week I reviewed a 40mm diver from Spinnaker. So I love that they're doing a lot of different sizes now. They're doing different styles. So if this watch is too big for you, they are putting out other watches that will fit you better. And if you are a bigger guy and you like bigger, bolder watches, they're giving you this option as well. So I love that they're kind of trying those different things. I don't really see the size of this particular watch as a con because, yeah, this is not their normal thing. This is the biggest watch I've seen them put out, and they just put out a 40mm last week. So yeah, they're doing a lot of cool stuff. And so if you like big, bold watches like this is a good one for you to check out, I think. So overall conclusion of this watch, yeah, I really like the design. I like the colors. I like the look of it, and I was surprised at how well it actually wears. I think Spinnaker has been doing just a really great job of creating cases that really wear well on a variety of wrist sizes. So even though it is a really large watch, it's actually very comfortable on the wrist. It fits my wrist very well, and it doesn't appear too large at all. So I think they did a great job with that. Price-wise, coming in at $400 I think is a little bit expensive. I think there's a lot of other options that you could consider from other brands in that $400 price point that would get you, you know, some pretty stiff competition to this watch, particularly with the quality control issues that I saw here. Now that said, I do have a discount code down below which will knock 15% off, which I think will knock it down under $350, so it'll get you a lot lower, and at that price it's a much more attractive option. So if you can get a discount code like that, definitely do that, and I think, you know, you get a pretty good deal with it. Either way, you know, if this is something that you like, particularly if you're looking at something that's got these sort of really bold, bright colors and you want that kind of summer watch, it's a great watch to take a look at, and definitely encourage you guys to check out the link down below. All that said, that's going to wrap up the review for today. Let me know what you guys think. What's your perfect size for a dive watch? Would you ever wear a 46mm? And what do you think about this particular watch? Thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you guys later, and we'll see you next time. Bye.